Coming up, we are heading out into the unknown world of space. Plus, we're hearing from native voices who work at NASA. I'm Mark Trahant. Join us for those interviews and some exciting stories.
Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations and more than 340,000 Native Americans. Arizona State University builds on more than 6 decades of working and partnering with tribal nations and communities. Many of our Native faculty incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems in seeking solutions through a process of community engagement that respects and honors traditional ways of thinking. Together, we are creating community solutions leading to a more equitable future.
This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Welcome to this holiday edition of ICT, where we are going to explore a world outside of Earth, space. We'll talk with Native astronauts and Indigenous engineers who work at NASA. And we'll start with an Indigenous space camp for young girls. The World Space Association celebrated Space Week in early October. Its theme, Women in Space. Raquel Redhouse has worked at NASA for 18 years. She's held several titles in that time, working at the nation's leading agency for space exploration.
Raquel, tell us what got you interested in working in space and at a place like NASA.
You know, I moved a lot as a child, and so TV and the news, I didn't pay too much attention to, so until the movies came, right? So I'd sit there and dream that I'd be helping NASA someday get more explorers, whether that be engineers, scientists, engineers, into space to find life out possible life out in space, to find what we don't know. So it's the unknown that I really enjoy.
Tell us about what you do at NASA.
I manage the Community of Practice webinar series that we have, and that entails finding speakers to talk about the new latest and greatest technology or the lessons learned from some missions, whether successful or not. And I also manage the software design tools. And there I find open source software tools that engineers, scientists, or researchers can use to achieve their science in space.
So it sounds like you help these scientists and engineers find the latest information about sending satellites to space. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We make the space missions possible for all of these small satellites, AKA CubeSats, to go into space. So I work with great engineers for the most part. I forgot to say that we have a rover that will be going to the moon on the Artemis Mission. It's called the Viper mission. It's going to be one of the first rovers to first of all have a headlight. I guess that was a big thing then. Everybody was like, this is the first rover that's going to have a headlight. But it's going to help get lunar science. It's going to help exploration and trying to find a sustainable location. So it's going to map out the moon and look for water concentrations and has helped the mission in that way.
And before this job, you worked, of course, at the Glenn Research Center. What kinds of projects did you work on there?
I worked on, for most of my career, I worked on what everyone probably knows now as the Artemis Mission. It's the next mission to take the first woman into the moon and the next man to the moon. It's been a few years since that's happened. And I worked mostly in the propulsion system portion of the Orion spacecraft. The propulsion system mainly is in the service module portion of the Orion spacecraft, and I worked and analyzed the thermal systems just to make sure that the propulsion system wouldn't overheat or freeze while in space.
Could you give us a timeline on when they're planning to send this spacecraft to the moon, and to maybe tell us in very plain English exactly what your job was in making sure that this is a safe mission?
Okay, so for Artemis 1, that launch is at this time very early 2022, so January, February timeframe. And then Artemis 2 is the one that will have the crew, and that is projected to be 2024. This service module allows the crew and the crew module to get into space and then to maneuver around and onto the moon.
Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about, if you'll actually be there to watch this spacecraft be launched. Is that something that you're planning to attend? I know those look really fun.
Oh, yes, very much so. I plan on being there. I helped analyze the OMS, the orbital maneuver system of the shuttle, the engine, the huge engine. At the time, I did a trade study and to find out if that shuttle engine would be able to help in this Artemis mission way back in 2007 or so. And lo and behold, this trade study became a reality. So now it is going to be used in the Orion mission or the Artemis mission to take our crew to space.
But even longer term, isn't the goal to be able to one day send humans to Mars? And I think what I read was that humans will go to the moon first and then go to Mars after that. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and that is another mission, the Gateway mission. That will be enabling, this will be after we get on the moon, maybe, and sustain and be able to live there on the moon. But then the Mars will be then soon sought after, I guess. It's going to be, like I said, the Gateway mission.
Could you tell us a little bit about maybe what it feels like for you to wake up and do this work every day, knowing that you're contributing to something that maybe, we might not see in our lifetimes, but something that our children's children could see one day?
That's part of my passion, is to share my experiences. And with this platform that I have, to encourage the next generation of students, hopefully Native Americans, more Native American students, and engineers, scientists, and researchers.
Aaron Yazzie is a face that we know and love in Indian country. He's a Navajo engineer at NASA who helped send the Perseverance rover to Mars. And I understand you have a special connection to Aaron. Tell us about that.
Yes, oh, Aaron, I love him. He had interned one summer at Glenn Research Center, and we have a Native American advisory group there where we take in basically the students who come from across the country, or and there's certain circumstances like it's their first time flying or they never left the reservation, and so we help them to feel not alone when they're away from home. So I was one of the mentors for Aaron.
And I love this idea of sort of recruiting the next generation of natives at NASA. We, of course, have a pretty good blueprint with people like John Harrington. What does that look like for you in terms of recruiting those native students? Do you speak at conferences? Do you speak to classrooms? How does that play out for you?
Fortunately, NASA has an outreach and recruitment efforts that happen And so I take advantage of that. I go to the American Indian Science and Engineering National Conference, since it is the largest conference where Native American engineers, scientists, researchers, and more attend. So I go there every year, and there's a NASA career booth. I ask students to come up and encourage them to work for NASA, just like I thought I did it, but I am here. So if I did it, they could do it too. Outreach, I do that also a lot, going back recently back to the Navajo Reservation and put on STEM related activities for them. So hopefully they can be the next Native American astronaut after John.
Growing up, did you ever think you'd work at a place like NASA?
No, never. I admired all of when NASA's been in any of the movies, there's always one specialist that comes in and saves the day, right? So I never thought that I could work for NASA. It just sort of happened, and I'm so grateful that I did, because this space is also another passion of mine.
And to have worked there for 18 years, I imagine, is the cherry on top.
Oh, yes, for sure. And very, very much so.
We only have a little bit of time left, but for the people who maybe are watching this or hearing this and they're meeting you for the first time, what takeaway do you have for Native communities who maybe are interested in space, or maybe for young children who look at you and Aaron and all of the other Natives at NASA and say, I want to do that someday?
I would say it's very, very possible. Just take that a step, that you have all these opportunities that I found out that they have. I thought I was going to be the person to come and bring all these opportunities, but there are a lot. Education and the STEM efforts have increased, and they are more informed these days. But I mainly go in to inspire and encourage them, help them apply to internships, ways to get in, little secrets maybe to get into NASA. And I want to help them, so I give them my card and help them to get into the internship at least.
When we come back, we will hear from the first Native American in space and how he took naps on the International Space Station. You won't want to miss this story. The International Space Station is the size of a 4-bedroom house, so finding room to sleep for 11 astronauts on board can be challenging. Kaylin Onawa-Boiselle spoke with the first Native American astronaut who lived there for more than a week. John Harrington shared with us the issues he faced while trying to get a good night's rest.
It's no surprise sleeping in zero gravity can feel funky to some.
Imagine going to sleep for the first time and you're not touching anything. It's weird. So I would squeeze myself up against the wall.
Former NASA astronaut John Harrington says he was aboard the International Space Station. It was much smaller.
There were 10 when I was there, and we were in about a half the size of what they currently have now.
But that didn't stop him from finding a comfortable spot to lay his head down.
The nice thing is we had these sleeping bags, and I would get in my sleeping bag and I'd squeeze myself between, a couple of large storage bags. So I had that feeling of being crushed up against something. It was comfortable for me.
That comfort even brought him to unexpected places.
Take a nap and just floating and, wake up over here. Sleep over here and wake up over there. That was fun.
He would sometimes wake up and not even know what time of day it was.
Took a nap on the flight deck. Woke up looking out the windows at night. It takes 90 minutes to go around the Earth. So for 45 minutes you're in darkness and 45 minutes you're in sunlight.
But when it's time to lay your head down and go to sleep, you sometimes don't expect what you see.
And imagine when you close your eyes, you see fireworks. because there's these, high energy particles coming out of the, distant universe, coming, they whack you in the head, and it kicks off a little flash of light in the back of your eye. So when you close your eyes now, all of a sudden you see this little flash of light that comes up, and you're like, what was that?
Something you can only experience sleeping in space. In Wisconsin, Caitlin Onawa-Boycell, Indian Country Today.
John Harrington was a guest on our newscast back in May of 2020. Harrington is a Chickasaw Nation citizen, and he spoke with ICT anchor Patty Talahungva about 2 special items that he brought with him up in space. Let's watch.
2 things that I could take out in my mission, and my commander said, John, pick very carefully, because everything else is going to be packed away. You never see it. But 2 things you can actually take out. And so one was an eagle feather that was given to me by Phil Lane Sr. Phil was an elder with the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. His son, Phil Lane Jr., is also an elder right now with ACES. And then the feather was really funny. The first feather he gave me was about this big. And he goes, well, you're a little astronaut. You haven't flown yet, so here's a little feather. And that actually came out of a car that was hanging from the rearview mirror in the parking lot. And then later on, he gave me this beautiful eagle feather. It was beaded Mother Earth and Father Sky and all the people of the world. And that's in the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. And then the flute, I flew a black cedar flute. Stand by.
Standing by. We also liked your shuttle items in the back there.
An identical cedar flute to this, black lacquer cedar flute, made by Jim Gilliland. I was a Cherokee Indian, was an engineer at the Kennedy Space Center, and he that's in the Smithsonian as well now. And this is a replica. I was out with an event with Carlos Nakai, and he wanted to play my flute in the Smithsonian. They wouldn't let him, so I contacted Jim. I said, hey, can you make Carlos a flute? So he made Carlos a flute and gave me another one. So this is great.
Nice. So things that are close to you and have huge cultural significance.
Yeah. I flew some sage. I flew some sweetgrass. I flew a regalia for a friend of mine, some feathers from his regalia, his traditional dancer, and his grandfather. So they were over 100 years old.
Wow.
And I flew those. It was great grandfather. But yeah, I flew those for him and gave them back to him. And little toys for my kids and some jewelry and stuff. But the significant things were being able to take the flute and the feather out and actually float those into the space station and the space shuttle and take photos of them. That was really meant a lot to me. Meant a lot to my family, I hope.
Aaron Yazzie is Dene, and he says when he first started studying the planet Mars, he thought it looked a little like the Navajo Nation. Yazzie is a mechanical engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. His most extensive contributions are for the mission to the planet Mars. Let's take a look.
I wasn't like the star student coming out of Stanford. The thing that I was good at was leading an ACES group, being a president of an ACES team. And those leadership things are what really helped me.
Get good grades.
It isn't every day a mechanical engineer stands on stage like a rock star. But that's how it sounded when Aaron Yazzie returned to his high school alma mater.
I'm so happy to be back home. It really just makes me feel reflective of where I've come from and especially the community that created me.
Yazzie literally is a rock star. He and his team at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory built the drills the Perseverance rover has used to bore into the rocky surface of Mars.
When I come back home and I'm talking to native kids around here, I like to point out the reason why the landscape of Mars looks like the landscape of the Navajo Nation is because they were created in the same way. The same forces created both of those places. The reason why we're studying Mars is because we're actually trying to learn a lot more about a rocky terrestrial planet just like Earth. So we're learning a lot about ourselves when we study Mars.
The Geology Rover is collecting samples NASA hopes to return to Earth in a mission 10 years from now, looking for signs of ancient life.
The picture on the top right is what we call the bit carousel. It lives inside the rover and it holds all 9 of our drill bits. The rover can spin it around and pick up the bit it needs and then put it back in and spin it back around.
The planet Mars is a long way from Holbrook, Arizona, a quirky town on the edge of the Navajo Nation where Yazzie grew up.
That's how
Aaron's dad studied civil engineering and his mom mathematics, both growing up in traditional Dene families where STEM thinking came naturally.
Native people have a lot of talent in the science and engineering area. They just need to put it to use.
My mom was a natural geometry person. The rug design and how it all comes together at the end, I'll be amazed. Mom, how do you know how to finish hair? It says,
My main influence is my parents, like seeing them grow up in a very traditional Navajo home, sleeping on sheepskin rugs and only speaking Navajo all their lives, to then going to school without also having a role model to sort of chase after. They found their way to college, got an education.
Yazzie attended Stanford University while exploring more interests through a half-dozen summer programs and internships. He connected to 2 separate NASA internships through ACES, which also offered Yazzie steadfast scholarship support even after another provider pulled its funding when Stanford grades slipped.
And I felt so bad. I thought it was the end. I thought I would have to go home. And I remember calling home and being emotional about it.
You worked out hard. And
right.
Then,
And I remember ACES always being so generous and being like, well, send us your next transcript or send us a midterm transcript and we'll see. Just another thing that ACES did. The confidence and the belief they had in me to finish, that I could do it.
The whole family has been active with ACES. At Holbrook High School, Yazzie talked up ACES, taking questions about motivating himself and working in teams.
To build a drill bit, I have to work with the machinist. I have to work with a bunch of people who know about materials and coatings. I have to work with people who are inspecting parts. I have to work with people who know about thermal properties and stress analysis.
I want to know what motivated them to help them get past all those hardships of getting into NASA.
Inspiring students to dream beyond their backyard, Yazzie stressed similarities between the geology on Mars and on the Navajo Nation.
They have a core, a mantle, and a crust, just like Earth does. They have erosion due to wind. They have volcanoes. They have Marsquakes, just like we have earthquakes.
His work focuses on the heavens, but this visit was about home. It isn't every day you hear cheers for a tribal introduction of clans and family, but maybe the students saw themselves in Aaron Yazzie, Indigenous space engineer from a line of rock star ancestors.
They were resilient, they advanced, they set me up for a life where I could move on and achieve my own dreams. So I always need to acknowledge that there's a lot more than just my own abilities and my own doings that got me to where I am today. I owe a lot to my relatives and my ancestors and my parents.
When we come back, a space camp for young Indigenous girls is teaching them to love space. Women make up half of the college-educated workforce, but only 28% go into science and engineering. That's according to the National Science Board, and one Arizona nonprofit hopes to change that. Caitlin Anoa-Boisel has more on taking up space camp.
I thought it would just look like you'd be under the clouds, but you were basically in the clouds.
11-year-old Suvi is from the Lakota Ray Band of Lake Superior Chippewa tribe in Wisconsin. This is her first plane ride ever, and she is going to space camp.
It's been fun because you know that it's not just like you who's Native.
A group of 7 young Native girls between the ages of 9 and 12 have been learning the ropes of space at the Space Education Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. The girls learn everything from science, space, problem solving, and even being positive about their own bodies.
And so we just wanted to have
program that we can uplift Native American girls and give them an opportunity, have a little bit of social educational equity, so that way they can pursue STEM or pursue anything they want. This actually just gives them a sense of confidence. So if they can do STEM and science, it's really tough stuff, I think that can translate to anything that they want to do. They'll know that they have the confidence to accomplish it.
Before the girls go to camp, they have a 32-week-long course on basic space knowledge and also meet with Native STEM leaders, such as John Harrington, one of the first natives in space.
Well, we decided that, just 1 year of space camp is good, and that's a solid foundation. But if a girl comes here for 3 years, plus our 32 weeks of mentoring, that's going to make a huge impact. And hopefully that will get the love of science.
The whole goal of the camp is to keep campers coming back, even after their first year. And funding is all donation-based.
Community feel for the program, that it's based on people just donating and wanting to help the girls.
And that kind of support could always help the young girls develop positive, long-lasting friendships.
Who's your best friend at camp?
I can't pick one.
Caitlin Onawa Boycell, Indian Country Today.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.